Hey everyone, it's Brad, and welcome back to the Bandwidth Tapes. Today I'm really excited to bring you a conversation with someone whose playing I've admired for a long time. Drummer Jordan Perlson. Jordan is one of those musicians who seems to show up everywhere, yet brings his own voice to the music. Whether he's playing with Becca Stevens, Guthrie Trapp, Jeff Coffin and Victor Krauss, or Adrian Belew, his approach is always thoughtful, musical, and deeply creative. In the episode, we get into his journey from Philadelphia to Berkeley, to the New York scene, and then eventually to Nashville. We talk a lot about collaboration, identity, recording in the studio versus recording from home, the drummers who shaped him, and even how streaming has changed the way we listen to music. I had a blast talking with him, and I think you'll really enjoy this. So let's dive in. Here's my conversation with Jordan Perlson. I've been looking forward to talking with you. I've been such an admirer of your playing for quite a while, and reached out to want to connect with you. So I appreciate you taking some time to talk with me today.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate it, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. As we were just chatting before we started, I recently had the pleasure of talking with Becca Stevens, who I know you've played with a lot over the years, and always enjoyed what you've brought to her material and love what you play in her band.
Thank you so much. So yeah, she's probably quite possibly the person I've played the most with in my life. And so yeah, we go way back for sure.
Yeah. Did you two meet in New York? How did you meet each other?
Yeah, we met in New York post college. Like everybody in the band minus me went to the New School, and they all met there and started playing while they were in college. And I went to Berkeley in Boston, and I moved to New York right after Berkeley. And I think it was just kind of kismet. I had played a bit with Chris Tordini, the bass player, who's, maybe the most world-class bass player on earth you'll ever hear or meet. And we played not with Becca, but with other people doing other things. And around the time that I met him, Becca's first record, T by C, was kind of making the rounds amongst, my peers and everybody I kind of knew. And I had kind of heard through the grapevine that they were playing drummerless because I think Tommy Crane, the original drummer, had moved away, or I don't remember what the circumstances were, and they just hadn't found the person that they wanted to play with, so they just kept playing as a drummerless trio. And finally I just said to Chris, like, if you're ever looking for like to audition drummers, I know all the music. Like I've been listening to the record nonstop, and I'd love to take a swing at playing with you guys. And then at the same time, around the same time, I was playing a lot with a really great New York-based singer-songwriter who's still there. Her name's Amanda Basinger, and she and Becca had become very close, and we're doing like duo tours. No, I mean like co-headlining solo tours kind of thing. So they would like just hop in a car and go down the East Coast and play shows together. And when they would get back to New York, both bands would play shows together. And so that's how I got to meet Becca. And Chris introduced me initially, and I said the same thing to her. And I think she liked my playing from Amanda's band. And they came over to my apartment, and we played, and kind of just went from there.
Yeah. One of the things I'm struck with by both of you is that looking at, the long list of both of artists that you both have played with, it's quite a varied list, which is amazing in itself, and that you play with all different kinds of musicians. And I get the impression that people really enjoy collaborating with each of you, which is amazing.
I mean, I hope so.
Yeah.
That's all you can. That's all you can really hope for when you do what we do. But yeah, I think at least for me, I try to bring like an element of like whatever you need to that to the person I'm collaborating with, while still trying to play something truthful to myself. Finding that middle ground of, it's rarely, even in band, even I feel this way even when it's a band like I'm in, whether it's Echo Lynn or the Guthrie Trap Trio or Becca Stevens band, like it's never, I have a hard time making it about me, like not caring what the other people think. It's like, nope, this is what I want to play and this is what makes sense to me. Like I kind of need it to be some level of support for other people, like regardless. And at the same time, maybe it's just because I'm getting older. The how do I put it? When someone asks me to play something that is so far off what I would play naturally, it's like getting harder and harder for me to humor that idea or honor it. I still do my best, but it's getting harder.
Yeah. Well, and I, funny enough, she and I had this conversation about bringing that collaborative energy to a project while still keeping your mission statement of yourself, intact while you're doing
Right.
it. I imagine it can be a challenge at times to kind of live in both of those two different places.
It is, although I'll say, because I do like the people that I mentioned, or like I have a trio with Jeff Coffin and Victor Krause, and that's a pretty, like, the only time someone, I won't even say tell someone else what to play, but suggests what to play, is usually when it's like, I don't really know what to do here. Anybody have any ideas? Otherwise, it's like, it is truly whatever you want it to do. I find myself in that situation when I'm a little more hired gun, playing the role of a hired gun. And even in that sense, I think it's still important to kind of find some level of your true self in that, because on a kind of vanity level, you don't want to be misrepresenting yourself and having your name attached to something that you would never do, and have decisions, people perceiving your decisions as your decisions. And then on a deeper level, it's just kind of like, well, you hired me, like I'd love to give you me, on some level. It doesn't have to be 100% what I would do on a first take and then I'm going to leave, but giving me a little room to just give you my instincts. Like you what you did was you hired my instincts. You didn't hire anything else, really.
Right.
So why don't you let that roll and see how it goes? Not always, doesn't always work. Not always the case. But as I said, as I get older and my career kind of goes on, that's getting harder to dance around in those situations for me.
Absolutely. I listened to an interview you recently did, and you were talking about influences, heroes, musical heroes, and two of the names that jumped out to me were Bill Stewart, Jay Bellerose. And when I heard those two names, I was like, of course, right? I mean, I hear, of course, you're you, which is so wonderful and beautiful musically, but I hear elements of the two of them so much in your playing, and it validated some of that for me. Like, oh, of course. I mean, I would see why those would be such heroes for him.
Yeah, I love it's like there's so I don't think there's any like drummers I don't like. Like I don't think anyone's ever played so much stuff that I dislike that I just can't hear them or something like that. I think it's interesting that we make these lists when really it's like most everybody's amazing. It's just like who really tops the list for you,
Yeah.
and who stands the test of time. And for me, it was like John Bonham and Will Calhoun kind of got it going for me. And then I can still listen to John Bonham and Will Calhoun any day of the week, any minute of the day, and love it. But I think when I hear, as Bill Stewart or Jay Bellerose, it's kind of just like, well, this is magic, and there's nothing unmagical about Bonham or anybody else. But maybe it's the magic of guys like John Bonham are it's like we've accepted the magic of
Yeah.
him versus like Bill and Jay. Their magic keeps growing because obviously they've lived a lot longer than Bonham did, and they're still alive making amazing music today. And it's just never not completely enveloping for me and my attention and my own artistry.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing I always have enjoyed about Jay's playing is it almost is like it's like a multi-percussionist approach to the drum set, maybe, instead of thinking of it just as a drum set. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't know if you've seen it or if anybody listening has seen it, but I don't know if it's bad form to recommend another podcast on a podcast, but
Oh, go for it.
Jake Reed, who's a really incredible drummer out in LA, he does these interviews in his studio where he brings in drummers he really admires. And it's great because we've all heard interviews with all of our favorite musicians, but in Jake's show, there's drum sets set up with mics and headphones. And so, for instance, he had John J.R. Robinson on, and they were talking a lot about his famous approach to backbeat and how, the downbeat and beat 3 are very much like square on the beat, but the backbeats are laid back, and something he, a lot of drummers do, but he kind of everybody kind of associates with him. And for the first time, I think, in the history of interviews of John Robinson, who's probably done hundreds, if not more, interviews for, say, Modern Drummer or other podcasts, someone said, well, do you mind putting those headphones on that are sitting right next to you? I'll put a click on and you can demonstrate it for us. Like, it's incredible. It's absolutely amazing. Like, It's like Jake needs like a Nobel Prize or something for these interviews. But he did an amazing one with Jay Bellerose where they talk about different grooves from famous records and how he thinks about them. And most interestingly, what Jay, and this is I'm rounding back to what you were talking about, the multi-percussionist approach. Not only thinks of things, I think he hears things sonically very different than the rest of us, which gives him this kind of multi-percussionist sound and approach. But he claims he has all of these kind of deficiencies in his technique and his approach to the drums, which he's over the years found these kind of like compensations and kind of workarounds that then forces him to think differently. So, he claims, I say claims because I can't, no one knows but you, no one knows your own problems but yourself. So,
Right.
and being my favorite living drummer, I'm not going to say he has problems, but, he talks about how his right foot is weaker than he thinks most drummers. So he does a lot on the floor tom. So he'll tune the floor tom in a different way and treat that like a bass drum and play it with a stick, which changes the way you play the rest of the groove and the rest of the kit. And it just kind of keeps peeling the onion until this whole different situation than, an approach than most drummers would. And that it just, it really, hearing him play even what seems like the simplest stuff always excites me so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It reminds me a lot of the drummer Kenny Malone that was played in Nashville many years ago. It almost has that same kind of a really just organic approach to the drum set.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kenny's stuff was incredible.
Yeah, incredible. When did you When did you move to Nashville, and what was the impetus of making that move from New York?
Yeah, I moved in 2016. I had been in New York for 12 years at that point, and I loved New York, and I loved the scene, and I loved so much about it and the life that I had there. But I was getting increasingly worried about the sustainability of the whole situation, and to put it bluntly, I wasn't seeing a whole lot of me's 10 years older than me still doing what we were doing. And that was concerning, you know? And it wasn't it wasn't like we were trailblazers, and it wasn't like, no one had ever done what I had done. That's why there was nobody older than me still doing what I was doing. It was like, no, like people have been freelance drummers for many, many decades. And so it's like, if this is so filtering and so, I don't know what word or phrase to use, but like if it's just so unsustainable that there's so few people doing it, there was just a handful of guys, like I said, like about 10 years older than me, 15 years older than me, actively playing like cool gigs and interesting stuff, and making their lives work, and making ends meet. That was a big kind of a red flag for me. So I started to think about other options, and I'd built a pretty cool network and kind of scene of musicians that I was touring a lot with. So I was like, well, depending on where I move, I could probably still tour with Becca. I could probably still I was playing a lot with and still do with Bob Lanzetti from Snarky Puppy, and Anna Rose, who's a really incredible artist who we were playing a lot at the time. And so I was like, if as long as I don't move to Jupiter, I'm pretty sure we can all still keep working together. And with in terms of Becca, it's like we play in Berlin more than we play in New York. So it wasn't really, there wasn't a lot of concern about that. So my wife at the time my wife at the time was also she was way more over New York than I was, so she was ready to go, and we came and visited Nashville, and we really liked it, and it spoke to us in a lot of ways, culturally and professionally, and lifestyle wise and quality of life. And we came a couple times and had a lot of trouble finding reasons not to move, and decided, it's going to be at least 100 years before New York's underwater, so we can always come back if we don't like it. So
Yeah.
and I've been here ever since.
Yeah. And I lived there 100 years ago in the 90s, and there's so much of that town and so much of the industry there is about connections. And how was that? Did you have a lot of connections in Nashville before you made the move, or what was that transition like?
No, it's funny. I tell this story sometimes, but when I moved to New York, I moved from Boston. I finished Berkeley in like May of 04, my graduation was like May 11th or something. And I moved June 1st, 04 to New York. And I remember this is like the early days of like laptops, and I'd gotten my first laptop in my last semester of Berkeley. Berkeley had some deal with Apple. You could get like a student discount or something. All this stuff is standard now, to get education discounts on all this gear, but this gear was all brand new at the time. And so it was a big deal that you could get, a MacBook for whatever price. And so I bought one, and I remember like 2 nights before I moved, I just opened up a Word document and wrote down the names of every single person I knew in New York, or was pretty sure was in New York, or had a friend of a friend that told me they lived in New York, and tracked down their phone numbers if I didn't already have them. So I had this list of like 100 people or something. And literally the morning after I drove to New York with the U-Haul and unloaded it, I woke up on my mattress on my floor in my apartment, opened up my laptop, and started calling people. And and 99 of them, we'll say if I got in touch with 99 of them, I don't remember, kind of gave me the like, well, all right, man, well, welcome to New York, see you around, like good luck. Like, which was really rough. And I mean, they could have been much meaner, I'm sure, but the one guy who was like, man, thanks so much for reaching out. And it's funny, I don't think I can't remember if I knew him in Boston, but I knew we had a lot of mutual friends. There's this guy, John Tornatori, who's an amazing saxophone player and composer. And he was like, well, what are you doing tomorrow? You want to get coffee? which is like a very Nashville thing, to make plans to get coffee. No one in New York, just casually makes coffee plans, at least not when I lived there. And, and we got together and, became a very, very close friend, and we made many records together. He was the first guy I played the 55 bar with, and met a lot of great musicians through him. And, it just kind of spider webs from there. When I moved to Nashville, I had like 3 or 4 people that I knew for sure, and was interested in being connected. Was already connected with them. Was just kind of like, I already have a relationship with this person. It's just now reinforcing the connection that I live here. And I had about like 10 people that I was aware of that had moved here over the years that I had not been in touch with for a very, very long time. And I just, like, in some cases I was like, it just feels awkward reaching out to this person I haven't spoken to in like 15 years, from Berkeley or something like that. But really the only list that was super important to me was the list of the people I really wanted to get in a room with musically. And that was Jeff Coffin, Victor Krauss, and Adrian Belew. And amazingly, all 3 of those came to fruition professionally and personally. They're all very good friends now. And that I think it was just I illustrate that those 2 different lists to, I think, just show a difference in time in my life and time in my career, where it was like, I moved to New York and I'm just throwing this super wide net and just seeing whatever the hell I could catch, just this Hail Mary of like, who has work, who who wants me to do anything. And when I moved to Nashville, even though I needed the work and I needed to figure something out quick, I was just kind of like, I think the work will probably come, most likely. I think, but I really would love to just try to focus on these like really special musicians that mean a lot to me musically, and see if I can mean something to them musically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I recently had Victor on the podcast, and he may be one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life, and
absolutely
just a sweetheart, and
disconcertingly so.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he just amazing. It's such an interesting difference in your approach moving to New York and Nashville. Is really interesting. Tell me about. I've always considered Adrian being like one of the most fearless guitar players anywhere. What was that experience like, getting to work with him?
I think fearless is a great word for Adrian. Fearless, not just guitar playing, but vocally and songwriting wise and composing. He's just kind of I have nothing but great things to say about him musically and personally. He sort of embodies. He's sort of, and I say this with love and admiration, he's sort of like a 12-year-old in a 70-something-year-old's body. Yeah. And he really actually doesn't look like he's whatever age he is. He looks much younger. But there's like a childlike curiosity and excitement in everything he plays and everything he does. And getting to see that and work with that every day was like a constant reminder of what makes music amazing and how lucky we are to make it every day, and how to sustain excitement and fun all these years, and my favorite part of every day touring with him was when he showed up to sound check. He'd plug in his guitar, and he had this crazy multi-effects unit, rack situation that I don't pretend to even understand. He had an Axe Effect, which I know is a very complicated effects processor for guitars. And then he also had a whole rack beyond that of stuff,
Wow.
Yeah. So like that tells you something. But, he would just plug in, and I think whatever kind of sound was on from last night, or when his tech had set things up for him or whatever, he would just improvise for like 2 minutes just to feel the room out and hear what the stage sounded like and hear what the room sounded like and feel what the guitar felt like in his hands in that, today. And every day it was so different, and it was always 100% of the time interesting and fun. And like I said, like curious, like he was like every note you could feel him being like, what comes next? It was never a lick. It was never the same old thing. It was never his sound check shtick. It was just like this completely new thing that every day it felt like we should turn that into something. I was like, the thought I was having, I was like, that could be a new song, that we should play that tonight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And of course we as with a band like that, that's not how it works. But, the creative person in me was reacting that way to those moments. So I loved the first moments of guitar sound check on with him. And I loved playing with him every single night.
Yeah.
Just pure energy, pure excitement. And of course, the most amazing repertoire maybe in the history of music,
Yeah. What was the configuration of the touring band that you were in with him?
Yeah, so
who was in that band?
when I joined the band, he had gotten done whatever, like 12 or 13 years of doing the power trio, which consisted of a few different configurations, but was always bass drums and him. And this band was a quartet with bass and drums. Julie Slick was still playing bass. She was his longtime bassist. And I think if should he do gigs under his own name right now, she would probably still, I'm assuming, be the bass player. But he's been so busy with the Talking Heads tribute and now the Beat, the King Crimson thing, the first 3 records from the 80s, kind of, I won't call it a tribute because it's his music, but project. So he hasn't been doing a lot just as Adrian Belew, as far as I know, but she's kind of his bass player, and myself on drums, and a really incredible musician who's another ex-New Yorker who's living down here named Saul Zonana, who to call him a utility player in the context of Nashville is like not fair at all, because if you're not familiar with the concept of a utility player, on tour, country bands will have somebody that plays a little bit of pedal steel and a little bit of fiddle, a little bit of rhythm guitar. Maybe they can play some leads on a telly or something like that. But they're kind of doing a lot definitely at a high level, especially depending on what gig you're on. But Saul was like the prog rock utility player, playing keys and guitar and triggering loops and singing backup, and just kind of like, doing really, like, if you decided to focus on him for a minute, you would be really blown away at just what an incredible level he was existing on on that gig. And he was also the opening act of the show too, doing his solo gig. Yeah, which was also incredible, full of loops and all sorts of amazing things. So anyway, it was a quartet, and Saul was the fourth member.
Wow. Yeah, I saw the tour. I saw him with Jerry Harrison and doing the Talking Head stuff, and it was unbelievable. And just the energy that Adrian brings to the stage and to any project he's in it's mind blowing to me to hear him
Absolutely.
play.
Yeah, absolutely. And he sounds as great as he ever has too, which is really wild.
Sure does.
Vocally and guitaristically. Yeah.
Yeah. So where did you grow up, Jordan? Where are you from?
I'm from the Philadelphia area.
Okay.
I grew up in the suburbs of Philly, and lived there till I was 18, and then went to Berkeley in Boston after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you go, has it always been down the drum set path? Did you do any classical percussion as well, or what was that path like for you?
Yeah, not really. I love classical snare drum. Like any chance I get to study a little bit of that, or if there's a new, like I love Portraits in Rhythm by Cerrone. Like, it's an amazing book, and I've studied that, and I teach it with my students and things like that. But that's about as far as, like, I don't play any mallets, and I don't play timpani. And when I do get to do something, say with the Nashville Symphony, it's like, I watch those guys in awe as I just sit behind my plexiglass, cage at the drum set. And that stuff is like, that's like voodoo to me. What true classical percussionists do. Yeah,
I spent a lot of. So I started out as a classical percussionist, played drum set and everything, but I was more on that side of the fence, I guess. And yeah, it is a daunting thing how much responsibility goes into all of that, right? Mallet choice. I mean, the way there's just so much going on with all of that.
Yeah, and like, that's just the mallets too. It's like, what about like when you have to play a really intricate triangle part, and then you have to like play like a really simple but exposed castanet part, And then,
Yeah.
when you have to count 900 measures of rest and come in with a crash cymbal, it's just like, this is like, it's stressful just saying those words. And I never do that.
Yeah.
Just thinking about it is stressful to me. But,
Yeah.
I played in like orchestra and concert band and stuff in high school, but I never ventured beyond snare drum and bass drum and hand percussion stuff.
Yeah.
And if there was a drum set part, I would do that. But yeah,
Yeah.
I never really picked up mallets much.
So you do a lot of teaching now? Do you have a lot of private students, or what does that look like?
I wouldn't say I have a lot. Last school year, I taught at MTSU, Middle Tennessee State University,
Oh, yeah.
here in it's in another town next to Nashville called Murfreesboro, and that was a nice experience. I would have loved to have continued it, but it was a little unsustainable for a whole bunch of reasons. So I didn't go back this year, but it was a really nice experience, a nice program, and but outside of school teaching at MTSU, I have like my bread and butter as a teacher tends to be kind of musicians or drummers who are kind of already professional level and in town working, maybe working a lot, maybe working a little. They want to work more. They want to refine some skills to get more work and things like that, which usually means they're very intermittent students. You know what I mean? So they come tops usually once a month or something like that. So if I were to claim I have a lot of students, I also wouldn't claim that I have a busy studio. You know what I mean? I kind of,
Yeah.
people, my students call me and say, okay, I'm ready for another lesson. And we put something on the books for that week or the next week. And then I don't see them again for a few months, kind of students.
Yeah.
So I love teaching. I would, love to do it more. I'm slowly trying to build kind of an online thing that I can offer. So I feel like that, especially given the demographic I tend to appeal to, you don't need to be in Nashville to study with me, and you don't need to like feel the pressure of studying weekly with somebody. So online would probably suit a lot of the people interested in studying with me. And so I'm slowly putting that together. It's, if there were just a few more hours in the day every day, that would be great. But as we're all pushed to the limit, and I'll get it out there eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how, as just as we're sitting here having this conversation hundreds of miles apart from each other, how technology has brought it closer together and taken something as in the same room as a percussion lesson or a percussion coaching and allowed you to do that with anyone across the globe. It's pretty incredible.
Absolutely. It's I think about, when I was in high school, and like, it's not that I'm not hungry, but like I think I'm just as hungry as I was 30 years ago, or 25 years ago. I don't want to sound too old, for information and for bettering my playing. But the difference is I was just so time rich back then that, I could, be zero. To me, like the height of technology, using technology to my advantage was my mom ran a small business out of our house. So we had our own copy machine. She bought like this really simple, you had to self feed the paper into one side. It wasn't like a big, it was actually cool because it was such a simple machine. It never jammed up. And it wasn't like the typical copy machine that you were fighting with back in the 90s, or maybe even still today. But to me, the height of like nerding out technologically in my pursuit of being a great drummer was Xeroxing all the lessons in Modern Drummer that month and then putting it into my binder and having it all, organized and collated, and then not having to like rip things out of the magazines, and keeping my magazines intact. And I still have those binders of all that stuff. And but so just thinking about how motivated I was back then and how far I would go geographically to take a lesson with somebody, especially once I could drive, versus like now it's just like logging on to Zoom or whatever, or somebody's online school, and it's all right there, and you're just instantly connected. I honestly, it probably would have been overwhelming for me as a teenager, but I'm sure I would have loved it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I had recently had a conversation about that with someone that I don't know if I don't know if I'm grateful more for the fact that it took more effort to go and find recordings of things that I wanted to listen to, or if I would rather have all of it at my fingertips at a moment's notice. I don't know which one of those I think I would prefer more, because I did like that active approach of having to go and seek it out.
Yeah, and there's another layer to that too. I mean, I understand that this or that conversation for sure, but the ease at which you can not only just listen to whatever you want to listen to today, and the ease of which you can just go to the next thing, is I think it's very problematic, because when before streaming, you'd spend, even if you bought a used cassette for $2. I'm not even talking about the $18 new CD, which is just wild to thinking about spending $18 on 10 songs, and anybody today is just like, they were like, well, you guys are crazy.
Yeah.
But even if you bought a $2 used cassette out of the used cassette drawer or bin at the record shop, like you knew the song that you for sure liked, or were pretty sure that was the song you knew about, and you were like, okay, I'm going to go right to that song and listen to that a couple hundred times or whatever. But then you're also like, well, I spent $2 on this, I might as well listen to the whole thing. And you listen to the whole thing, and there was like maybe one or two songs that you're like, oh man, this other song's just as cool as the song I knew I liked. Though those other 8 songs are kind of garbage. And then you listen to that song a couple dozen more times, and then you're like, maybe I should listen to it again. And you go through this process of like getting your money's worth out of whatever you bought. And no one feels the need to get their money's worth anymore, because you're basically not spending any money on it. Like, yeah, even if you spend $12 a month or $14 a month on your Spotify or your Tidal subscription, it doesn't feel like you don't have like the need to get your money's worth out of it, because you are $14 for the whole history of everything recorded ever, is pretty good. No one's arguing the value of that. But I remember buying Peter Gabriel's record So, because like everybody else at the time was just bananas over Sledgehammer. And then, I remember listening to Washing of the Water and kind of being like, this is boring. This is a slow, boring song. I don't care about this. And now that's one of my favorite songs of all time, I think, because of the time I spent, the few hundred more spins that record got over the next year or two. Because I was like, eventually you're like, it becomes understood that Sledgehammer is a masterpiece, and you'll always hear new and exciting things in it, no matter how many times you listen to it. And then you get curious again about what else is on that record, because you spent $18 on it and you want to listen to it more. And no one's going through that experience of, I bought it for this, but now all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but over a process, the original track that attracted you to something, it turns out is less important to you, is less inspiring to you, it's less attractive to you. And there's this whole other world of sound and songs in this little package that you wouldn't have given, you're not going to give the time of day on a streaming site, on a streaming platform, because you don't have to. There's no motivation to. And that's kind of, it's sad, and it's a little, it's alarming to me, because so much growth as musicians is done in those listening sessions. You already know what you love. If something speaks to you, it speaks to you, and that's exciting and cool. Like, but there's not a lot of mystery to what, if something speaks to you on the first listen, there's nothing really like mysterious about that. It's just like, it just is what it is. But like, there's a lot of mystery for me to think about my relationship with songs that didn't speak to me that do now.
Yeah.
And
absolutely. Yeah. I think about albums that I listened to when I was 14 years old that I will go back and listen to today as an almost 50-year-old and hear them completely differently, based on where I am in my life, or how my ears have developed. And it requires that active listening, the difference between hearing and listening, right?
Absolutely.
To get to really absorb that. Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree with you.
Yeah. And my stepdaughter, who's 19, she has a really cool taste in music for someone her age, and who's been exposed to the things she's been exposed to. And like, it's just funny to like, she'll say, I remember at one point she was saying Tears for Fears is her favorite band of all time, which of course I was pumped to hear her say that. And I was like, well, which records, are you really into these days? And it was really just that she loved Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and that was enough for her to say that that was one of her favorite bands of all time because that was their song. And I was like the I was born I was born a couple of weeks into 1982, so I've got one foot in Gen X and one foot in millennial. Because I also have an older brother who was feeding me music and culture and movies, and all the musicians I played with were kind of his age, and so I kind of feel like I live in both worlds generationally, and the Gen Xer in me so badly wanted to just be like, you're a poser. You can't say that's your favorite band of all time if you can only list like 1.5 songs, But
Right.
but the millennial in me was like, I'm just grateful she's not listing off like video game soundtracks as her favorite music of all time. You know
No,
what I
it's
mean? Which is like
so
what a lot
true.
of which is what my stepson was doing at the time. He's actually kind of getting he's 17 now. At that time he didn't care about any music that wasn't related to a video game. He's since become interested in hard rock and Metallica and Mars Volta and stuff like that, which I'm also really pumped about for him.
Yeah.
But again, it's all playlists. It's all one song at a time. It's all just like cherry picking the thing that spoke to you and not giving another thought to the stuff that didn't. And that's a bummer. And it worries me for what the music will be like moving forward. For that, a lot of things worry me about that, but that's one of the elements that worry me about it.
Yeah. Well, it'd be like, watching a 2-hour film and skipping through to your favorite 10 minutes of it instead of watching it from beginning. An album, there's a reason why those songs are together, and there's a reason why that track listing is in the order that it's in, and it should be listened to as much as possible in its entirety as you can, right?
Absolutely. 100%. And I think like preaching that, it just makes you sound old. It makes, it's like here's a perfect example is what movie did we watch? We went and saw a movie a couple days, like just last week. Wow. I remember liking it, whatever it was, but this is not a good plug. I have a toddler who's going through sleep regression right now, so I'm
Okay.
a little underslept right now. But anyway, another brick in the wall, part one, came on in the movie. Oh, it was Black Phone 2. Good
Okay.
movie.
Yep. Okay.
We enjoyed it. Black Phone, the first one was one of the, not that we need to talk about movies, but a huge, like to me, is a total sleeper. Great horror movie. Really simple. Highly recommended. Black Phone 2 was fun. Feels really different than the first one, but they use another brick in the wall, part one, in the movie, and it's really effective. It's a great needle drop in the movie. But what was funny was I was like, is this Pink Floyd or is this like a modern cover of that version of that song? Because I had an affinity for part two, and I would make like mix CDs, and part two is like really in my DNA. I can recognize it within the first half a second that it's on. But because part one is a little slower and mellower, and
Hmm.
there's no big drop and there's no drums or anything, like I think I always skipped it as a teenager and would always just like jump to part two and put that on my mixtapes and my mix CDs. And I was like a little bit embarrassed that I couldn't. I pulled out my phone and Shazammed it during the movie. I was like, I need to know, and there's like, no, it's Pink Floyd. There's just a big gaping hole in my knowledge of Pink Floyd and this record. And I was like, I think this is just what everybody's experience with music is going to be. I'm not saying my knowledge of music is airtight minus this Pink Floyd situation. I have plenty of gaping holes everywhere, but it's no, like so few people are going to be airtight unless they've got the historian, kind of like musicologist bug in them. Yeah. So anyway, we've
And
we've harped on
it's
this
and
subject
it's
quite a bit, but
no, it's it. This is something that it comes up on here a lot. As 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 time goes on, and as we get older, it's incredible to see how all of this is just so quickly changing around us. And I'm with you. Having kids, I feel like I live in this kind of dual world where you know I mean, I was just talking with my wife about that the other day, just about how much. I remember having a VCR when I was a kid that the remote was connected with a cable, and how far
Yeah,
things have come in my lifetime. It's quite remarkable to think about just how much has happened since I've been alive. It's insane.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I tell this story all the time, but we had a double deck VCR at one point, which was like the coolest thing on earth because we would just go out and buy tons of blank tapes. And if we rented a movie from Blockbuster that we loved, we just dub it the way you dub a tape in a double deck, boombox.
Yeah.
And at one point, our house got robbed, and the thief stole the double deck VCR. And the reason I'm telling this story is because this is another incredible, like wild showing of the difference of times and difference of generation and technology. So he stole the double deck VCR, and in the VCR was our rented copy of the Dennis Leary movie, The Ref, if you remember that movie. And
Kevin Spacey, I think too. Yeah,
I think you're right. My brother, that was the movie my brother rented. I forget what I got that week. And Blockbuster wanted like $175 for it because they weren't just charging for the tape; they were charging for like lost rental income. And what they were paying, I don't know exactly how the licensing worked for them back then, but it wasn't just that they were buying the tape to rent; they were buying the license to rent it too. And so they wanted us to pay some insane amount of money to cover all of that. They wanted our insurance to pay some insane amount of money for that. And you just think about like, yeah, no one's renting tapes or paying for license. Like, yeah, Netflix is paying for licensing, but they're not passing that off to us if my computer gets stolen or something like that. It's all just so intangible and cheap, to put it any other way. It's the same way it is with music, but like just to tell that whole story, it sounds I might as well be to also mention a pterodactyl flew into our house at the same time. You know what I mean? Like
I do know what you mean.
And how our Model T broke down that same week, and like I think to anybody younger than 20, like they wouldn't have any way of second guessing, some of those facts. But yeah,
it's remarkable. Yeah. My kids give me a hard time about that all the time about like, so what was it like, when you had to do your homework by candlelight, that kind of crap. I'm like, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
So what are you working on these days? I know are you still playing with Guthrie's trio? Are you guys still playing the trio?
We're still doing the trio. We play every week in Nashville, every Monday. If anybody listening to this is in Nashville or coming to visit, come see us on a Monday at the Underdog. It's a great show, super fun. Get tons of people coming in from out of town, tons of musicians in town come to hang. It's always a really good time. We do that. There's kind of an expanded I used to think of it as an expanded version of the trio, but now it's become its own project, something we call Guitar Party, which is Guthrie and Tom Bukovac and Jed Hughes. They're the three three of the biggest guitar heroes, in this town and on this planet. A project that features them. And it's Tim Marks and myself. Tim Marks is the bass player in Guthrie's trio, and he plays bass in Guitar Party. And then also Jimmy Wallace, who's an absolutely brilliant piano player and keyboard player, plays and sings in that band too. And we've got a show coming up November 1st at 3rd and Lindsley here in Nashville. And right my trio with Jeff and Victor we've been rounding the bend on this new record for a long time, but everybody's just so busy. It's hard to get the checklist, get the punch list done. But I think we're like moments away from sending it off to be mixed, which is really exciting. And that's a cool. If you haven't checked out our first record, it's just Coffin, Perlson, Krause. I'm really, really proud of that. That is a true trio record, sax, bass, and drums. We recorded it during COVID at Victor's studio. It was the first band thing he recorded at his studio, and I'm really quite proud of that record. And this new record it's the trio, and then every track has special guests on it. So I think there's only one or two actual trio tracks, but Mike Stern's on a track, Jerry Douglas is on a track, Bela Fleck, Sam Bush. So there's some amazing guests going to be on this new record. Yeah. And been touring a bit with Jessica Simpson, which has been really, really fun. Her new records are kind of rock and roll, rockabilly, Americana, country kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Very different.
it was J.D. McPherson produced that, I think.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. Yep. And they're great records. I mean, like when all the social media stuff started popping up, a lot of my buddies played on the record and were playing in the first incarnation of the live band. They're all posting about it. I was like, I think we all had the same reaction. We're like, is there just a different person named Jessica Simpson? Like
I did the same thing, man.
I think everybody had that reaction. And then you look closely and you're like, no, that's Jessica Simpson. And she's singing like these totally awesome, really amazing, beautifully produced, like kind of dirty sounding rock Americana stuff and country stuff. And I know those are three very different genres, but you can hear the influence of all of them in these new. Yeah. She's putting out like a series of EPs, so that's why I'm saying records plural. And the band is killer. She's super cool. She is an incredible performer, and we do like a gig or two a month. I think she's kind of slowly getting back into it after a very, very, very long music hiatus. And couple things on the horizon that I can't quite publicize about yet, but I'm pretty excited about. And and just doing a ton of recording from my studio here where I'm talking to you from. I do a lot of remote recording for people, everything from independent artists who reach out to me to producers who are working on tracks to film scores to jingles to whoever needs live drums and percussion.
Yeah. How do you feel about the flexibility and convenience of recording at your house versus recording in the room with other musicians? What are your feelings about the two of those?
It's probably almost an identical dichotomy to having all of the recorded music in history at your fingertips for a very small amount of money, and how cool that is, but how it comes with, a lot of baggage too.
Sure.
I love recording drums with and for people. It's maybe my favorite thing in the world. I love to play shows and interact with get that energy too. But the act of recording is my favorite thing, and I can do it at a higher volume and interact and be a part of more artists and producers' projects and composers' projects with this amazing setup that I've been blessed to have. And that said, speaking of the Jessica Simpson stuff, when I sat down to learn the music, I'm not positive. I can't speak to this, and if I was really, really curious, I'm sure I could find out. I don't think a lot of it was even recorded to a click. And I don't say that because the tempos are all over the place. The tempos are actually amazing. There's an amazing drummer named George Slupik who is based here right now. He's moved around a little bit, but he's in Nashville, and he played on the record. And he just sounds unbelievable. He just sounds so great. And when I sat down to make charts and learn the record, learn the music, I was tapping out tempos, and I was like, I don't think this is to a click. It feels amazing, and it never would have occurred to me until I started to try to lock a tempo down. And you listen to something like that, and I know what studio it was recorded at. It's actually a very not romantic, fancy, expensive studio. I think JD wanted it to kind of have to sound. He had a real intention with how he put those sessions together, and he nailed it. He absolutely nailed it. And you're not going to get a record like that remotely. You're going to be able to get so much cool stuff remotely, for sure. You can make a lot of amazing music that way, but there's in the Venn diagram for the possibilities of recording, when you've got remote over here and in the room over here, there's a lot in the middle. There's a ton in the middle, but the stuff that's to the side on the in the room side that doesn't coincide with the center is really special. And everything from stuff that can happen when you're when the red light is on and you're playing with a band, to coming up with ideas in real time with other people in the room with you. The I think one thing that's going to transform soon, I don't know exactly how. I know there's stuff like Session Wire and Audio Movers, and I think there's one or two other services that do something similar. If you're not familiar with those are technology that allow you to kind of like connect remotely into the session with the person you're working with. So if you hired me, you could kind of be remote in to my Logic session, and we can communicate. You can listen to the audio as it goes down, and then once we get done, we can communicate like, okay, that last chorus, I'd rather you go to the ride, or whatever. That's cool. I actually, if I'm working remotely with somebody, I actually don't love using those technologies. That's not my preference. I know a lot of people actually feel similarly, but I think there's going to have to be like the whole act of I do a take for you. I get a take that I love, that I think is that I'm proud enough to share with you, and I send it to you, and maybe you get back to me 5 minutes later. Maybe you get back to me tomorrow. Like I know Aaron Sterling, who's probably the most recorded drummer these days. He does a lot remotely. He has a whole thing of like, I will send you something at noon. You need to get back to me like right away. I'm not like he moves at a clip that you just can't. You can't wait around. He doesn't wait around for people. He's like, I'm going to start moving mics and moving drums to get to the next song. So if you need something changed, you need to get back to me right now. I'm not at a place in my career where I can demand that. And there have been situations where I've said, I'll have something for you around 4:00. Please, if you can be ready at 4 to get, like, I'll do something similar. But that whole part of the process is a little informal and like a little finicky to me. I think there's going to be some kind of transformation to the process that's going to make it better and more efficient for everybody, for the buyer and for the provider.
Yeah.
That will be exciting, and we'll think back to the days of like sitting around and waiting for revision requests and be like, oh, I can't believe we did that. I don't know what it's going to look like, and I don't think it's an Audio Movers or a Session Wire, even though those are cool technologies, and I think they do a lot of they add a lot to the industry. I think there's going to be some other solution that comes around.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought about that piece of the puzzle, but you're right. And I would imagine that piece of it, of like sending it off after you've done your work and then kind of sitting around thinking, all right, now I'm playing the waiting game until I know if I'm good to move on to something else. That has to be a little daunting at times.
Yeah, exactly. And especially, and I think it affects every musician who works remotely, but particularly drummers, because like the audio can change so drastically with one little change in our vast, complicated setup of not just drums but microphones, and like where the baffles are in the room, and like what your signal chain is for your kick drum versus your overheads and things like that, and your choice of drums and cymbals. And like for a perfect example is I finished a song for somebody kind of late in the work day one day, and I sent it off, and I even said, I'm done for the day. Feel free to take your time, get back to me later tonight or tomorrow morning. I'll be back in the studio after I drop my kids off at school or whatever, no rush. And here in Nashville, the temperature really fluctuates most of the year. Like when you're in the dead of summer, it's always hot. When you're in the dead of winter, it's always cold. But those are really only like 6 weeks each. And then the rest of the year, like right now, it was 40 degrees when we walked outside this morning, but it's probably going to be 70 or 80 this afternoon. So it fluctuates a lot throughout the day. And I stupidly forgot to turn the heat back on in my studio because I turned it off because it had gotten really warm throughout the day. And then it got whatever into the 40s or the 30s overnight. And my studio got really cold, and the tuning of the drums all changed. And the person got back to me and asked for a final chorus change or something different in the second verse. And I couldn't so I had to recut the whole track. I couldn't just punch in because everything had changed so drastically. So things like that was obviously a technical blunder on my part, but that's like, those kinds of factors affect us drummers so much. You know what I mean? Just as an example.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. And I suppose that time will hopefully work work all of these things out, where it can, that collaborative piece can happen. But
it can be more aligned with timelines and things like that. I would imagine that recording from home too in your studio allows you to maybe get a little bit more creative and have a little extra time to work on some things that when everyone in the studio is not looking at the clock, knowing what budgets are and things like that, that has to allow you a little more time to relax and feel more creative.
Absolutely. And the really cool thing is right on the same note that you're talking about is like if I'm in the studio with a band or with the artist or something, and I'm theorizing of a part that I'm like, I don't think the drum part needs to change a whole lot throughout this track. I think the choruses need to be accentuated by a tambourine or by some other overdub or something. That's how we'll know percussively that we're in a different section. Mm-hmm. But I don't think the part needs to change a lot and the sound needs to change a lot. Or the part needs to stay the same, but I need to add a little extra low end to the snare drum in the choruses or something like that, something to create, like that's how the part will change, not the actual performance, It's really hard to get people to imagine that together in a room when they can't hear it all together. The amount of times someone had been like, that's really cool, but I really wish you did something different in the chorus. And I'm like, yeah, I think what the chorus needs is a shaker and a tambourine on beat 4, and that has like some really cool spring reverb and, maybe like a really like reverbed out guiro scratch on the last one or something like that. And like, I hear it, but that's a lot to imagine, especially for, say like someone who's really concerned with just the song, how the song they wrote is going to come out like that. That's a lot to expect. Whereas when I'm working remotely, I can just present all of that, and they might say, wow, that's really cool. I hate that shaker. Can you take it out and go to the ride? Like that's ideal because I was able to present my idea in its full kind of realization. And they could just respond to it and be like, cool idea. That's not it. Can you just go to the ride and like actually change the part? Versus you can't even flesh the whole idea out for somebody in real time in the studio because there's no time for that. For you to go all the way through the song or even just to demo one section of the song only for them to be like, yeah, I still don't like it. Now you've wasted however much time. And, and everyone's looking at you like, good work, dumbass, for wasting our time. And you're really trying hard not to conjure that sentiment ever when you're in a studio with a group of people. So yeah, like in that sense, working remote is so great because you can present the whole idea when it's ready. You have nobody looking over your shoulder, nobody looking at the clock, and you can just get it there.
Yeah. Jordan, I've had a great time hanging out with you today and talking.
Thanks so much, Brad. Thanks for having me. This was a blast. I love chatting with you.
That was my conversation with Jordan Perlson, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Jordan is not only a phenomenal drummer, but also an incredibly thoughtful musician, and I loved getting the chance to dig into his story. If you want to keep up with what Jordan's doing, be sure to check out the links in the show notes. As always, thanks for listening to the Bandwidth Tapes. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with a friend. It really helps the show grow. I've got more great conversations coming your way soon. Until next time, thanks for hanging out with me.